and my work is geared towards what is happening when these NGOs that we've traditionally looked at are being not only co-opted, but are being really altered in their nature in so many ways by these entities and these power structures that you are discussing. Well, I don't want to kill Bambi here, but that is, there's some, and I'm an NGO worker, so I say this from a very personal place in my heart. We've got some serious concerns. Where do we turn next?
And we created the Alliance to Defend Healthcare. We started as an ad hoc committee, realized it's not an ad hoc problem. You know, we got kind of naively involved, thinking we could run a ballot question, set standards for the healthcare industry, and we got totally creamed. And the group Medicare-for-All, which takes hundreds of thousands in funding from the hospital industry and the insurance industry in Massachusetts. It really is so upsetting to say that, but I finally went down to the Attorney General's office, had some of my college student interns last summer, and looked up their filings, because why did they twice in a row, like, turn against these far-reaching health reforms? At the last minute, they unendorsed ballot question 5, and then at the last minute, the week before the second constitutional convention vote, they unendorsed the healthcare amendment to establish healthcare as a constitutional right and to set some legal standards. And I said the day we were having our final task force 4 years ago of that language, that we inserted the 2 words, prescription drugs, as what would be covered as a right, a human right, and a legal right for people, that we were asking for these behemoth powers to come out against us, but they wouldn't do it publicly. They'd be going behind the scenes to the State House and pulling the strings of the leadership, because if we set a constitutional guarantee that people had a right to affordable, equitably financed drugs, you know what that might do to set the stage to really examine how the drug industry peddles their wares?
My thinking is that nurses are almost invisible from mainstream reporting in the media at all. I dialogue with New York Times, Washington Post, national reporters on healthcare, and they all tell me nurses are so valuable, yet they never mention them, or what nurses do specific to patient care. I think that if we could move beyond the idea of using unions as the model to organize nurses and give them the voice at the table, but rather transform that into nursing self-governed organizations that are essentially professional practice groups that come in and negotiate directly with the former employers, said this is what we'll give you, this is what we demand for our resources. The same things that physicians do when they come on staff, credential the same way, maintain the same standards, but put the power for nursing practice back on nurses instead of the employers, then the patient autonomy will be boosted way up. And that would really create 3 million workers now, for autonomous professionals, that would be moving directly towards patient power.
One thing I haven't heard people discuss at all today, really, is something that's very dear to me, which is systems of medicine that operate outside of the pharmaceutical orbit altogether.
My name is Mitch, and I'm a practicing scientist. I don't work in medical research, but I wanted to thank the panel for being so respectful about the role of good science in this kind of work, and also about the danger of junk science. If Dr. Abramson, when the panel comments, if you have a moment to talk, I'd like to hear about open access publishing models in the medical field. I don't know anything about them. Do they exist? Thank you.
The medical community is moving toward collective bargaining historically, so that for nurses to abandon collective bargaining and go in the other direction, maybe, I don't know, it's an interesting concept. A group of us from Massachusetts are going up to Canada 1 month from today. We'll be meeting with Canadian nurses, comparing notes, among other things, about our respective healthcare systems and the way we are able to protect our patients and advocate along with them in the workplace. I think advocacy is the important thing. I have not been fired because I have a collective bargaining agreement, even though I've testified before every kind of legislative assembly opposed to the policies of the hospital industry. And while I'm a very pacifist kind of person, every time I get a hospital CEO in my line of fire, I pull the trigger. From Jim Mongan, the CEO of Partners at a conference a year or so ago. And I think if I didn't have that protection, I would have been out of healthcare a long time ago.
Many of you may have seen the press conference about a week ago when Senator Kennedy and Congressman Dingell introduced Medicare-for-All. Many people who've been in the sort of single-payer movement many years have struggled with the misunderstandings people have about what single-payer means. And though they think of it as something bad, socialized medicine, on the other hand, they think of Medicare as a good thing, and that's exactly what Medicare is. So they're trying to think about applying Medicare to the whole population, introducing it maybe gradually. And I think there's some promise in this approach. But the important thing is to look the devil's in the details and make sure that as this proposal, Medicare for All, moves forward and the details are flushed out, that it doesn't end up, once again, selling out to the drug industry. One of the worst bills, if not the worst bill ever passed in this country was a few Decembers ago, and that's Medicare Part D. And what happened was the biggest welfare package ever given to any big industry, I think. Billions have been made by the drug industry. And we've got to reverse that. Members of Congress realize now the big mistake it was. We've got to be able to charge lower, basically do some dealing with the pharmaceutical industry, so we'll have lower drug pricing, particularly for publicly funded programs. It's true in every other industrialized country except maybe South Africa.
A delegation from MassCare sat down with Pat Walrath, the House Chair of the Joint Committee on Healthcare Finance in Massachusetts, I think it was about a year ago, and she told them that nothing comes through the Healthcare Committee that isn't approved, comes out of the Healthcare Committee that isn't approved by the insurance industry. I ran that by Steve Tolman, the senator from Brighton, who's our lead Senate sponsor of the single-payer bill. That comment a couple of weeks later, I was chatting with him, and he said that that's not exactly true. You may recall about 12 years ago, there was a fight to end drive-through deliveries. So on one particular managed care question, we were able to beat the insurance industry, but it doesn't happen very often. What Steve told me, though, is that the insurance company lobbyists are as thick on Beacon Hill as farmers lobbyists are on Capitol Hill. And I think when you talk to power, I've been at a number of dinners and receptions and conferences in the last couple of weeks, and those of us that are advocating the single payer as the way to go, basically socialized health insurance in Massachusetts, to be confronted with the total power almost of Blue Cross Blue Shield and partners in terms of paeans of praise for having solved the healthcare problem with this recent Massachusetts miracle. A lot of good came out of it. A lot of things remain to be seen. And I think we have a very good critique of it in a PowerPoint presentation on our MassCare website, masscare.org. Feel please free to go to the website and click on it.
I just want to pick up on the comment about NGOs, which resonates. They're good NGOs, bad NGOs, they're not all good. They all preach democracy, transparency, and accountability, and virtually none of them are any of those three things. On the other hand, there's some wonderful ones out there, and I'm not going to argue that mine's good, but the Global Lawyers and Physicians, I'm going to ask, just go to our website, glphr.org, which has a perspective that if you can unite two powerful professions, maybe they shouldn't be so powerful, they have their own built-in values. Lawyers should be justice and liberty, doctors should be health and suffering, that they can work transnationally together to do things that they can't do separately, nationally or internationally. And I actually think there's some hope. That's not the only way to go, but that's one way to go.
I want to pick up on, Sandy, a couple of comments you made about the new Massachusetts healthcare legislation. The three organizations that contributed most to the lobbying for this are Partners Healthcare, a nonprofit organization, so they can't make profit, but they made $600 million in surplus last year. Blue Cross Blue Shield, again, nonprofit, $250 million in surplus, last year. And Eli Lilly, the drug company. And I heard yesterday, I don't know if any of you have started to hear the ad campaign yet, but I heard the beginning of the ad campaign from Blue Cross Blue Shield about the products they're offering that are in conformity and will satisfy the requirements for individuals to purchase health insurance. So they're going to get their money's worth. I'm sure they invested well. Now, I do want to address a more important question, which our scientist asked and which Nina asked, and ironically, I think there's a similar answer, which is these issues I don't think are ultimately going to be answered on a rational or legal basis. I think that there are structures that we human beings gravitate toward, structures of authority, structures of belief, and those must be addressed. So, Nina, I totally endorse your empowerment, your self-empowerment. And I think a lot of what's going on in the medical field right now is like the women's movement in the 60s. Don't treat me as an object, treat me as a subject. I totally endorse the way you've taken control of your own health care. Yet, in society, I think we are hardwired from time immemorial to seek the help of empowered healers who have a special knowledge that we can bring our troubles and our mortality to and expect that there will be a beneficial outcome. And that has been co-opted. And it's not okay. No matter how much empowered you are, we will get sick. We do need health care. And it's not okay to have to be empowered but have a dysfunctional system of medical authority. So that's not a stable situation. For the open access issue on science, I would like to offer a similar perspective, that we do have some open access, like the Public Library of Science is open, and there are some other journals that are becoming open. The problem is that the citation rate, it's a good thing, we need it, and it's great, and I go to it. But the real issue we want to know is the impact that information that has on the belief system of physicians and policy people and so forth in comparison to others. And we got a beautiful example of that in terms of a study that came out of litigation, information for litigation, about what doctors knew about the drug Zoloft. And they looked at the articles that were published between 1998 and 2000, and more than half of the articles had been marshaled through by a medical communications company that had been hired by the manufacturer. 100% of those articles were positive. The other independent articles, 18 out of 41 were positive, and the professionally marshaled articles were cited 5.5 times more frequently than the independent articles. So we do need open sources, but we must remember that until the social impact of those open sources starts to equal the social impact of what are now closed sources, which are largely under the control of the pharmaceutical industry and other commercial industries, we won't be fixing the problem.
I mean, I think we're all sort of responding to the problem of big pharma becoming too big. You know, it's just taking up too much room. So we don't have room for holistic health, we don't have money for universal coverage, we don't have all of these things that are sort of being steamrolled by these companies that make double-digit profits. I mean, why should a company that's making medicines for sick people be making double-digit profits? Well, I think one thing, if you look at the sort of development of big pharma in this country, it's followed very much on the heels of changes in our FDA rules and regulations. From 1906, 1938, 1962, and then recently with the PDUFA, et cetera, et cetera. And one thing that, and I agree with your point about rights and rights talk being really problematic. I mean, I've seen in the areas that I've looked at of people talking about drug companies saying, well, people have a right to be in a clinical trial. Well, where did that right come from? They're sort of making this stuff up, because, and it works, and and people line up, well, yes, let's start doing experiments on prisoners because they have a right to be in experiments, and that's the Institute of Medicine recently sanctioned that argument. One of the things I talk about in the book, which I think could go a long way towards restraining big pharma, is to demand more from our own regulators. I mean, right now, new drugs are approved on the basis that they are safe and effective. Okay, well, effective means what? Effective, the way the FDA interprets it, is more effective than nothing. Right? So we have new drugs that don't have to prove that they're better than what we already have. They only have to prove that they're better than a placebo. That is, they're better than nothing at all. Well, that's really not telling us much. I mean, that's not telling us what we need to know. We need to know that drugs are going to be better, whether they work better, whether they're safer, whether they're easier to administer, or whatever. And that's definitely within the purview of our own regulators to say, what we mean by an effective drug is a drug that's better than what we already have, not just better than nothing.
So let's thank the panel one more time for a wonderful session. Thanks everybody for coming. Esto no te está parando.
celebrating independence, you're celebrating life. The earth waking up, you're celebrating life. And I'm glad to celebrate with you. But just like freedom, just like independence, where I was dropped on this world in Mexico, there is a saying, tierra y libertad, land and liberty, as if they were the only things that a human being needs. Well, there's something else that we need today, and that is genetic sovereignty, genetic independence, our independence to decide for ourselves what happens with our bodies and what happens with the bodies of all the other organisms with whom we share this world. That freedom, that independence, that sovereignty is something that is not given, is something that has to be fought over and over and over. And I'm really glad to be here with these people who have chosen to stand up against a huge challenge to our genetic independence and sovereignty, to our freedom to decide what happens with our bodies, with the plants that we eat, with the animals that we take care of, and with all the other organisms in the world. Huge challenge happening. I invite you to get involved, to get engaged. This is a question of life. If you celebrate life, please join with the people who are here, your neighbors, in opposing the takeover of your genetic freedoms and your genetic independence. We're doing the same over on the other side, on the coast of the Pacific, where the West ran out of West. We're doing our best there to uphold these principles of genetic independence and freedom. And I'm glad to be here with you and invite you to be engaged. Thank you.
Thanks, Ignacio. Our next guest, also here from Vermont, is my friend Ann Peterman. Ann Peterman is the co-director of the Global Justice Ecology Project in Heinsberg, Vermont, and along with several others of us, is the founder of an international campaign to stop the genetic engineering of trees. And Ann has been traveling literally all over the world over the last several years, working with NGOs and the UN and many other channels to try to address the problem of GE trees.
How many of you are familiar with the fact that corporations like Monsanto are also involved in genetically engineering trees? Yeah, not too many people have heard about this. There's a company, though, called Abramson that's one of the sponsors of the Biotechnology Industry Organization's conference here in Boston, and they are the main pushers of genetically engineered trees in the world. And I think you can imagine what some of the problems might be if a genetically engineered tree were to contaminate a native forest or any of these trees around here. We have been fighting the genetic engineering of trees since 1999 when we first heard about it when we were actually in southeast Mexico. Now what they're planning is genetically engineered trees for right here in the United States. And they're planning them for the Pacific Northwest, the upper Midwest, and the Southeast. They've especially got their sights on the Southeast. Abramson is based in South Carolina. And what they want to do in South Carolina is put in genetically engineered poplar, genetically engineered pine, and now genetically engineered eucalyptus. Eucalyptus are not native to the United States, but they want to have massive genetically engineered eucalyptus plantations in the southeast United States. And you know what they want them for? They want them for paper, and they want them for biofuels. And do they care that eucalyptus are an extremely invasive tree that takes over native ecosystems and wipes out native species, that it catches fire? They are planning these things, and they are planning them for the very near future. This is something we all need to be concerned about. So I hope that you will check out our webpage, stopgetrees.org, and find out how you can get involved. Once these trees start contaminating, there is no reversing that process. It cannot be stopped. And once a native tree is contaminated, it then becomes a contaminant in a never-ending cycle.
Thank you, Ann. As well as being an extreme hazard to biodiversity and all of life on Earth, the biotechnology industry represents the capturing of our very health by corporations. And somebody I've just had an incredible pleasure working with over really just the past day and a half, who's one of the most articulate people on that subject I have ever met, is John Abramson. He's a family doctor from up on the North Shore. He's on the clinical faculty at Harvard Medical School, and he's written a very important new book about the drug industry called Overdosed America. John Abramson.
Brian, thanks so much. And thank you, folks. It's a pleasure to be here with you. The same way that the corporations are challenging our natural environment with genetically engineered crops, with genetically engineered trees, a disaster waiting to happen, we've got a disaster that is happening, and it's the American healthcare system. We are spending twice as much as the other industrialized countries on healthcare, and Americans live less time in good health than the citizens of the next 21 wealthiest countries. This is what we're struggling to pay for, and this bad medical care is what is going to be imposed on all Massachusetts citizens through the legislation that's come in that doesn't question our medical knowledge. Now, the same way that the corporations are challenging our environment with genetic engineering, they are providing the medical knowledge that is guiding the doctors that are taking care of you. The editor of The Lancet, the premier medical journal in the United Kingdom, says the medical journals have turned into information laundering operations for the drug companies. Now, what can we do? The drug companies want us to believe that we need them for good health. Most of our health is determined by how we live our lives, whether we exercise, whether we eat a healthy diet, not smoke, drink in moderation, maintain a reasonable body weight. These are the things that we can do to stay healthy. These are the things we can do to prevent heart disease. What we need to do is what the women's movement did in the 1960s. We've got to demand that we are treated as subjects, not objects, that we take back control of our own health care, that we find primary care doctors who will talk to us about these things. And most of all, that we understand that when corporations are involved, they have a primary fiduciary and moral responsibility to make as much money as they can for their shareholders and investors. Their responsibility is not our health. We've got to see to our health. We've got to help each other to achieve better health. Thank you.
Thank you, John. We've already had a very busy couple of days here in Boston. Last night at Old South Church, we had an amazing session with Ignacio, with 3 representatives of farmers' movements from all around the world. Because, of course, here in the United States, when people think about the threat of genetically engineered food, the first thing that comes to people's minds is we can go to the natural food store, we can go to the co-op, and we can find food that feeds us. But for people in other parts of the world, this technology is a threat to their seeds, it's a threat to their way of life. So we had representatives from farmers' movements from Bangladesh, from Nicaragua, from the Tesuque Pueblo in New Mexico, and we had an amazing session. This morning, John and others spoke to us about biotechnology, medicine, and human rights. All of the audio and video from those sessions will be available online over the next few days. Check out our websites at biojustice2007.org, biodev.org. Tomorrow, we have a really important gathering that I hope all of you will join us at. We're going to be acting in solidarity with folks in Roxbury and the South End who have been fighting for years to stop Boston University from building a hazardous research lab for the purpose of developing biological weapons. Where are the weapons of mass destruction in the world? They're right here in the United States. Boston University wants to bring them to Boston, and we say no. One of the most dynamic people working on that issue for many years who will tell you about the events tomorrow is Claire Allen from Safety Net in Roxbury.
Hey everybody, how you doing? I can't hear you, talk to me. How you doing? All right, that's what I like to hear. You know, I never really think about what I'm going to talk about until I really get up here. And one thing that I really wanted to talk about was the empowerment of people, people power. You know, I think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Each one of us as individuals decide that we want to celebrate, spontaneous celebration, and look how many people are here, doing the same thing together as one. You know, the Safety Net started this campaign in 2002 of March. And for a whole year, we had the hardest time trying to convince people that BU wanted to build this bioterror lab. We'd go up to stations and give them a flyer and say, BU's bringing the plague. They'd be like, oh, girl, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, wait a minute, they're trying to bring. Nobody would listen. But then when it came to year 2003, when it was a little bit too late, it was in the Globe newspaper. And it said that Boston University got $123 million to construct the bioterror lab. It's a level 4 lab, only 3 in the country. All of the diseases are incurable. They want to put it by City Hospital, right on Albany Street. Either way, when we went and heard about this, we went to a meeting. We got a phone call. We went to the meeting, and we sat down, and we heard from Mark Klemner from BU, and we heard from other people from BU. And pretty much they were saying, don't worry about it. You got 4,000 labs in the city of Boston. Ain't nothing to worry about. You haven't blown up. You ain't caught nothing. Don't worry about this one here. So we said, okay, because we didn't know what a level 4 lab was. About a month later, we got another phone call. And then it was from a guy who said we had to go to another meeting. We went to this meeting of scientists. We asked them, we heard them say, the plague, Roxbury in the South End. Ebola, Roxbury in the South End. We said, wait a minute, do the residents know about this? They said, well, if you can get some competent residents to talk to us, then we'll talk to them. And because of that statement, that's why we have been fighting now for 5 years. We now have people from around the city. And tomorrow, we will have a march. Because when we fight and fight big battles like this, we need to know who are we representing. And we're hoping that we are representing everyone who is here hearing my voice. And if that is the case, 11 o'clock, Dudley Commons, come march and party with us in the streets. Thank you very much.
So I hope we'll see everybody tomorrow. Dudley Commons at 11, Blackstone Park at 1. The biotech industry is in town all week. We got to have some surprises ready for them. Thank you.